going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. I've got a couple of interesting stories for you guys today. A lot of interesting stuff to talk about because today was officially the last day for men's open bodybuilders to qualify for the 2023 Mr. Olympia. And you had two men's open shows that were Olympia qualifiers. You had the Legion Sports Festival here in the States, and then you had this Olympus Pro over in Milan, Italy. And this was a show that was kind of a last-minute addition to the calendar. This wasn't something that we knew about way in advance. It was just kind of added at the last minute. And both shows were on Sunday, today. Typically in the U.S., the shows are Friday or Saturday night, and typically the overseas shows for us wind up being on Sunday, but both these shows were today, which I found to be interesting. So let's talk about the Olympus show first, because chronologically it ended maybe 10 hours before the Legion show ended. So in this show, you had a lot of these European bodybuilders that have been competing in the past couple of shows, trying to get this last-minute qualification. So in first place, you had the French bodybuilder, none other than Theo picking up the win here. We've seen him compete a couple times this season. I think every time we've seen him, he's looked pretty impressive. Over how he looked last year, I think he's added a lot of size. He comes in really good shape. And if you guys don't know which guy is Theo, in these pictures, he's the guy to the far right of the screen in the black trunks with a little bit of facial hair. That's Theo. I think he looked phenomenal. I think he deserved the win. In this lineup, he beat Roman Fritz, who took second. Roman was already qualified. He already picked up a win, so he's already in the lineup. Tim Budashim took third. In fourth place, you had Alfred Shiriak. In fifth place, you had Matthias Hallwick. And in sixth place, you had the Brazilian bodybuilder Leandro Perez. So I didn't think there was really anything controversial or surprising about this particular decision. I thought that Theo clearly won that show. I think he deserved it. And now we have a new name added to the Olympia qualified competitor list for 2023, which today, it's worth pointing out, is now finalized. So we're going to talk about that at the end of this video, because after the Legion show, you now have the final list for men's open of the guys that are qualified. So we know now who all is going to be at the Olympia. So we'll talk about that at the end. But next up here, we've got to talk about the Legion Sports Festival. This was the big show here in the States. And I want to start out with Classic Physique, because I think there was a very big Classic Physique battle here that a lot of people were excited to see. Rough Diesel was in this show. Obviously, he just won the Dubai Pro. That qualified him for the Olympia, so technically, he didn't need to do this show or win this show to get there. But he did it anyway, and he blocked Logan Franklin. I saw someone put a comment where they called him the Logan blocker, because now Logan Franklin is unqualified for the Classic Physique Olympia. But Terrence wound up winning. Logan wound up in second, and a newcomer named Darren Sherbayev apparently placed third here. He's the guy that you see in these photos to the left. And this is exactly what I wanted to see from this show. I wanted to see Logan do well. He looked good in the updates leading up to the show, but I really wanted to see him and Terrence next to each other and Logan get a really fair call out next to Terrence, because like I said in previous videos, they've got two very different physiques. It's a very apples and oranges comparison, kind of like Terrence and Chris Bumstead, a much bigger, taller guy, Logan, next to Terrence. They're just two very different looks. And I just wanted to see them side by side in that top two comparison. And we did get to see that. We got to see him next to Logan pretty much the entire time. And I think Logan really did look fantastic here. I think this was a really close show. And I want to mention, I'm not showing any video from the show because I heard that Legion is aggressively copyright striking anybody that posts any video from the show. I just talked to my buddy, Desktop Bodybuilding, and they apparently copyright struck him for, I don't even know what he shared. But honestly, I think they should reinstate his videos, and I think that's a bad move. From what I've seen of his videos that I've watched, it's always fair use. He's always giving commentary and transformative with the videos, with the nature of his commentary. And I think, honestly, whether they like to admit it or not, I think if there were no YouTube channels talking about bodybuilding and talking about these competitor lists and talking about these smaller shows for months leading up to the show, I think like 10% of the viewership would exist. I think their live stream sales would be down like 90%. If these YouTube channels didn't exist to talk about these smaller shows. Like the shows like the Olympia and the Arnold, they're always going to have good pay-per-view numbers. But these smaller shows, if nobody's hyping them up and talking about them, especially on YouTube, I don't think very many people are interested enough or care enough or have a storyline to follow to convince them to buy a pay-per-view. So I don't know. I just felt kind of bad for Xavier over there at Desktop Bodybuilding when I heard about that, and I hope that he gets his videos reinstated, and I hope that he gets that strike removed. Because honestly, I've never seen him do anything that was copyright strikeable. All right, so before we get into the men's open bodybuilding portion of Legion, I want to talk about a couple other stories that happened this weekend. Number one being the Brandon Curry physique update at 5 weeks out. I honestly think that Brandon is looking really impressive, and I think he's really inserting his name back into that conversation. For much of this kind of off-season and the build-up to the Olympia and a lot of the conversation about predictions and who's going to be in the top three, Brandon Curry's name has widely been left out of that conversation, but I feel like he's putting it right back in because these updates are really impressive, and I think he is going to be a factor here more than people initially thought. I think people forget he was top 4 last year. He was just right there knocking on that door, and again, him and Hadi Chupin will be the only 2 former Mr. Olympia champs competing in the Open Olympia this year, and that counts for something. Brandon, at one point recently, set the standard for what Mr. Olympia is. And I don't think he's fallen off, and I don't think he's declined since then. I think it's more a case of the quality of his competition has gotten better. These young, new guys just weren't there when Brandon was winning, when he won. So I don't really think it's a situation like Big Ramy, like there's an injury or there's a body part that started to decline or there's just like some nerve damage or whatever. I don't think it's that situation with Brandon. I think this is the same Brandon that we're used to seeing, and I think he looks like he's going to be on. So I don't think it's a question of Brandon is going to be off or he's going to be injured or he's not going to be his normal self. I think the question is more, how is his physique going to stand up to some of these newer guys? The Derek Lunsfords, the Nick Walkers, the Samson Dowdas. How is he going to look next to them when it looks like all of them really have improved significantly since last year? I don't think it's impossible for Brandon to find himself back in the top 3, and I feel like people will be surprised with how good he looks and how well he does at this year's Olympia. I think this update is kind of a testament to that at 5 weeks out. He looks really good. His conditioning looks good. He's got the shape that we know he has. He's got a really nice, pleasing to the eye aesthetic physique for open bodybuilding. I think people are going to be surprised. Even me, I've been seeing, all these new young guys, especially Derek, especially Nick, especially Samson, and I've been talking more about them and less about Brandon, and also because we haven't gotten any updates from Brandon up until recently. And I haven't really been talking about Brandon until we started seeing these updates, and even now I'm looking at these updates thinking, man, he really could be a factor here. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below about how Brandon Curry is looking. And where do you think he'll place at the Olympia? Now, another update that I wanted to talk about here, I already made a short about this, but Derek Lunsford. This recent update that Derek posted, he's posing from the front and the back, but particularly when he's posing from the back, he looks so impressive in this update. And I said this in the short that I made. I think more people have sent me this video that Derek posted saying it's game over, new Mr. Olympia, or asking me what I think about it, than any other update from any other competitor competing in this year's Olympia. Literally hundreds of people have sent me this, and he just posted it yesterday. There's no denying how impressive Derek looks here. And again, I think you got to consider the fact that last year, when he was second place, he was runner-up at his first ever Open Olympia, his first ever Open Pro Show, by the way. He only knew and only prepped for the Open Olympia for less than half of that year. Up until the halfway point around May or June, he still was debating on doing 212. He still didn't know if he was going to cut back down and try to make that 212 weight limit. This year being different, he took the entire year to focus on growing into Open and focus on competing in Open, whereas last year he didn't do that, and he was still second. And I think what you're seeing in this update from Derek is the fruits of that labor, the improvements that he's made. I think you're going to see a bigger version of Derek. Hopefully we see a more conditioned version of Derek than we saw last year, because I think that's really the only thing keeping him from Hadi, is Hadi's conditioning is just so crazy. Derek hasn't really matched that yet, especially from the front, especially in the upper body, the arms, the biceps, the chest. From the back, I think Derek already beat Hadi. I think he beat him last year. I think he'll beat him again this year from the back. But it's that conditioning from the front, especially in the upper body. If he comes in bigger this year with a more dramatic V-taper, with these crazy flaring lats, more size, and better condition, Derek could win this thing. I honestly think that. Now, I still think that Hadi is going to be a very difficult to beat champion. His conditioning's insane, and the bar that he set is pretty high. But I don't think that any bodybuilding fan, Even if you're a Samson fan or a Hottie fan or a Nick Walker fan, I don't think any bodybuilding fan can look at this update of Derek and not like say to themselves, wow, that is fucking impressive. And from a personal standpoint, I can't help but to root for the guy. I hung out with him at the Arnold Classic, him and Hani, and he was hitting poses for Hani in the hotel room, and just hanging out with him in person. He's like the nicest guy you could ever meet. He's like the most humble dude, super nice, super personable, and you see him post physique updates like this, just insane. I can't help but root for this guy. And I think if he did win, this is the type of guy that you want to be Mr. Olympia. I think he'd be a great ambassador for the sport. Like I said, just super friendly, super personable. He's like the type of dude where he can sit in a room and hang out with anybody, and he talks to everybody and just gets along with everybody. He's that kind of guy. And when you see a guy like that put in the work and bring a physique like this, you got to root for him. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Where do you think Derek will place at this year's Mr. Olympia? Can he improve on his runner-up placing last year? Or do you think he'll place worse than that? Let me know in the comments below. Now, next up in the news, I wanted to talk about this as well. We also got a physique update from Big Ramy that had a lot of people talking, but I wanted to clarify this. So Ramy put up a post, and he said, can you guess which competition I'm prepping for in this update? And it's him posing. He looks pretty impressive. Conditioning looks good. I saw some people in the comments get excited and thought that maybe he was still going to do the Olympia or jump in the Olympia, and that this was an update from the Olympia prep, and that was the implication with the caption. But I'm sorry to say that this is a video from him prepping for this year's Arnold Classic in 2023, earlier this year. So he's not doing the Olympia. He is out. He's still out. This is not from the Olympia prep. So I don't want people to get their hopes up. A lot of people sent me this update as well and said, do you think this is from the Olympia prep? Do you think he's still going to do it? Do you think he's still going to jump in? Do you think he changed his mind? No. This is from the Arnold Classic. We saw some pictures from this update back then in March as well. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to see Ramy at the Olympia this year, and I think he's making the right decision by taking that time to really focus on recovery, trying to fix the nerve damage issues, trying to let the stem cells work. I think it's the right move to take time to let that process happen and see how much it really does happen, because, again, a lot of this is kind of theoretical. A lot of this is kind of unknown. Stem cells have been known to have crazy results on all types of different injuries and illnesses, but it's really not known to what extent Big Ramy could use this type of treatment to rebuild a muscle group and fix nerve damage in his back or his tricep. And if it does work, how much muscle could he regain? How much could he get back to 100%? We don't know that. It's really not known. And I think that process is really going to be something that takes time, especially with a bodybuilder, because like I said, even if it does work, if it fixes the nerve damage and that's considered a success, does that mean he gains back 10% of the muscle that was there? 50%? 90%? Can he get it back to where it was prior? We don't know the answer to that question. So I think for Ramy to really reap the full benefits from this, I think he's going to need to wait and see and take his time and really maximize the amount of recovery that he can get from these stem cell treatments. So in short, I think he's making the right move, and he's not going to be at the Olympia this year. And this is not a recent update, but let me know what you guys think in the comments below about Ramy's decision to be out of the Olympia this year. All right, so the final story that I've got for you guys today, let's talk about the results of the men's open portion of the Legion Sports Festival. It just ended right now as I'm recording this video at 11 p.m. Eastern Time, Sunday night. So in 6th place, you had Max Charles. In 5th place, you had Eric Wood. In 4th place, you had Vitor Boff. In 3rd place, you had Justin Rodriguez. In 2nd, you had John Jewett. And in 1st, you had Charles Griffin. So let's talk about the top 3 here specifically. And these photos are from NPC News Online because, again, Legion doesn't want people using their clips. They don't want people. They've copyright stricken a couple channels that I know about now. And I was actually watching a live stream on Instagram of somebody talking about the show, and his got taken down during the show. So they're like very actively not wanting people to stream or use anything from the show. So these pictures, NPC News Online. Your top 3 here. Justin Rodriguez in 3rd, John Jewett in 2nd, Charles Griffin in 1st. Let's talk about Charles first. So Charles Griffin, going into this show, a lot of the updates that I saw from Charles, and I said this a few videos ago, I predicted Charles was going to be the winner. I think in these updates that he's posted, I thought he looked the best that he's ever looked. He looked really impressive at 4 weeks out, 3 weeks out, and then the week of the show he was posting updates. He looked great. I had a feeling he was going to win, and that's what happened. Conditioning was crazy. I think one of his best looks to date. And I think, to be completely honest, I think he has potential to be a top 10 Olympian. And I don't say that lightly. I think this was a very, very impressive package from him. And at last year's Olympia, he was 14th, but keep in mind, he was 14th out of like 30-plus competitors, and he was right behind Michael Krizo and Patrick Johnson, and he beat Justin Rodriguez, who was 15th there. But overall, really impressed with how he looked here, really impressed with his conditioning. I thought at prejudging and at finals, to me, he was the clear winner. Now in second place, John Jewett. Now, if you don't know which one is John, he's the guy on the right-hand side of the screen. Now, this was John's open debut. He came from competing in 212, and I made a couple short videos about John because I saw some of the updates he was posting going into the show, and I didn't realize how impressive he looked at like 1 to 2 weeks out. I knew that he was doing this show. I knew that he was doing open, but I wasn't really considering him as being a big factor here until I started to see those updates within a week to 2 weeks out, and I was like, wow, this guy actually really looks pretty impressive, even for a 212 guy coming to open. His conditioning looked great. He looked bigger. He looked really good here, and I think it was probably pretty close between him and Charles for first place, actually. This was a really solid open debut, so as much as I think Charles looked fantastic here, maybe the best Charles ever looked, I think John actually gave him a run for his money, which is really impressive for a guy that was making his open debut. And Justin Rodriguez in third, kind of the same story with Justin. He looked good here, but his physique to me still looked a little bit tired. Definitely not the best Justin that we've ever seen. And I think that John and Charles were far and away 1 and 2. I think it was much closer between them than it was between John and Justin. But a really competitive show, and I think a really well-deserved victory for Charles Griffin. And now we're going to see him at the Olympia. And again, I think he belongs there. And I think he has potential to be a top 10 guy. He is the real deal, and I was very impressed with what I saw here from him today. But again, I kind of want to reiterate, I really don't like what I'm hearing about all these videos getting copyright striked, all these videos getting taken down by Legion. Because honestly, this is not a big show. This is a show where they need people to talk about this show. This is a show where they need YouTubers commentating on their competitor list for months out. They need that kind of publicity. This is not an Arnold Classic. This is not a New York Pro. This is not the Olympia. Those live streams do not sell themselves on the merit of this just being the Legion Sports Festival. How many of you guys, if you didn't hear a YouTuber say it, whether it was me, Desktop Bodybuilding, RX Muscle, whoever, how many of you would have known that this was the last Olympia qualifier if you didn't hear it from a commentator? It just really irks me, and again, I feel for Desktop Bodybuilding because it's channels like that that make these shows sell tickets and sell pay-per-views. I've seen the back end on the pay-per-views of some of the larger shows that are much bigger than Legion, and I promise you guys, the live stream model right now for some of these smaller shows barely works as it is. If it weren't for the publicity that these shows got from YouTube channels and podcasts and people commentating about the lineup or about the show and about the physique updates going into the show, the live stream model for these smaller shows would not work without that publicity. It just would not. They would not sell enough. And I think the only instance where a copyright strike from one of these shows is acceptable is if somebody hijacks the stream and simultaneously live cast the stream at the same time as the paid stream and broadcasts the whole thing as is with no commentary and just puts it up for free on their YouTube channel live simultaneously with the original cast. That's really the only instance where a copyright strike is really valid here. If you're commentating on clips or pictures of this show after the stream is ended, it's fair use. But anyway, enough about that. I don't want to go on too much of a rant. I want to go over the final Olympia qualified competitor list. As promised, it was updated on October 6th, but we now know the final 2 names that were added to this list after the 2 shows today. But this is your Olympia competitor list as of right now. This is the final version of the list. So you can now add the names Charles Griffin and Theo LaGuerrier to this list. But you've got Brett Wilkin, Hadi Chupin, Derek Lunsford, Nick Walker, Brandon Curry, Big Ramy, who we know is not doing it, Samson Dauda, Behruz Tabani, who is still a maybe based on his visa situation, Tonio Burton, Ross Flanagan, Ian Valier, who we know is not doing it because he's retired now, Michael Crizzo, Phil Klahar, Andrea Presti, Hassan Mustafa, Justin Shire, Roman Fritz, Hunter Labrada, Andrew Jack, Kamal El Gargni, Nathan Daasha, and Regan Grimes. And again, Charles Griffin and Theo LaGuerrier. That is your final Olympia qualified competitor list for open bodybuilding. There will be no point standings qualifications for this show. This is it. So now, seeing this list and knowing all the names, let me know your top 6 Olympia predictions in the comments below. Who do you think will place within that top 6 in the first call out? Comment down below. Like, comment, subscribe. Click that bell notification icon. And as always, I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. Nick Strength and Power signing out. All right, guys, don't forget to click that like button and subscribe to this channel if you enjoy the content. Also, check out my Instagram at NickStrengthPower. My Facebook page, which is simply Nick Strength and Power. My secondary YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Vlogs, for vlogs and bonus content that you will not see on this channel. And consider subscribing to my third YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Pokemon, which is all things Pokemon and trading card games, completely unrelated to this channel. So if you're into that, give that one a look. And all links to merchandise and social media will be in the description box below. If you guys want a Nick Strength and Power t-shirt, that will be in the Shopify link below. Have a great day.